Octaves of radiation. So far the forces that create worlds have been spoken of, and the process of creation proceeding from the absolute. We can now look at the process that takes place in the already created and existing world. It must be borne in mind at this stage, however, that the process of creation never stops. Although on a planetary scale, growth proceeds so slowly that if we tried to reckon it in our time, planetary conditions may be regarded as permanent for us. Hence let us take the ray of creation after the universe has already been created. The action of the Absolute upon the world, or upon the worlds created by it or within it, continues. The action of each of these worlds upon subsequent worlds continues in exactly the same way. All suns of the Milky Way influence our sun. The sun influences the planets, and all planets influence our Earth, then in turn the Earth influences the Moon. These influences are transmitted by means of radiations, passing through starry and interplanetary space, through dark matter. In order to study these radiations, let's therefore take the ray of creation in an abridged form. Absolute. Sun. Earth. Moon. In other words, let's imagine the ray of creation in the form of 3 octaves of radiations. The first octave between the Absolute and the Sun. The second octave between the Sun and the Earth. The third octave between the Earth and the Moon. Let's then examine the passage of radiation between these 4 fundamental points of the universe. In this, we need to find our place, and to understand our function in this universe, taken in the form of 3 octaves of radiation between 4 points. In the first octave, the Absolute will include 2 notes, do and ti, with the interval between them. Then will follow notes la, so and fa. Then the interval and the shock filling it, unknown to us, but nevertheless inevitably existing. Then mi and re. The radiations reach the Sun. 2 notes are included in the Sun itself, do, an interval and ti. Then follow la, so, and fa. Radiations going towards the Earth. Then an interval and the shock of organic life which fills it. Then mi and re. The Earth. Do, an interval, ti and then la, so, fa. Radiations going towards the Moon. Then again an interval, a shock unknown to us. Then mi, re and the Moon, do. These 3 octaves of radiation, in which form we shall now imagine the universe, will enable us to explain the relation of matters and forces of different planes of the world, to our own life. It must be observed, that although there are 6 intervals in these 3 octaves, only 3 of them actually require to be supplemented from outside. The first interval between do and ti, is filled by the will of the Absolute. The second interval, do, ti, is filled by the influence of the Sun's mass, upon radiations passing through it. And the third interval, do, ti, is filled by the action of the Earth's mass upon radiations passing through it. Only the intervals between fa and mi have to be filled by additional shocks. These additional shocks can come either from other octaves that pass across the given point, or from parallel octaves that start from higher points. We know nothing about the nature of the shock between mi and fa, in the first octave, Absolute. Sun. However, the shock in the octave Sun, Earth, is organic life on Earth, that is the 3 notes, la, so, and fa of the octave which starts in the Sun. The nature of the shock between mi and fa, in the octave, Earth, Moon, is again unknown to us. It must be noted that the term, a point in the universe, that has been previously used, has a quite different meaning. Namely, a point represents a certain combination of hydrogens that are organized in a particular place, and fulfill a definite function in one or other system. The concept point cannot be replaced by the concept hydrogen because hydrogen means simply matter, not limited in space. A point, on the contrary, is always limited in space. At the same time, a point of the universe can be designated by the number of the hydrogen that predominates in it, or is central in it. If we now examine the first of these 3 octaves of radiation, namely the octave, Absolute. Sun. From the point of view of the law of 3, we shall see that the note do will be the conductor of the active force, designated by the number 1, while the matter in which this force acts will be carbon, C. The active force which creates the note do, in the Absolute, represents the maximum frequency of vibrations, or the greatest density of vibrations. The expression density of vibrations corresponds to the frequency of vibrations, and is used as the opposite to density of matter. That is to say, the higher the density of matter, the lower the density of vibrations, and vice versa. The higher the density of vibrations, the lower the density of matter. The greatest density of vibrations is to be found in the finest or the most rarefied matter, and in the densest matter possible. Vibrations slow down, and almost come to a stop. Therefore the finest matter corresponds to the greatest density of vibrations. The active force in the absolute represents the maximum density of vibrations, while the matter in which these vibrations proceed, that is the first carbon, represents the minimum density of matter. The note T, in the absolute, will be the conductor of the passive force designated by the number 2, and the matter in which this passive force acts, or in which sounds the note T, will be oxygen. O. The note La will be the conductor of the neutralizing force designated by the number 3, and the matter in which sounds the note La will be nitrogen, N. In the order of the action of the forces, they will stand in the succession 1, 2, and 3. That is, corresponding to the matter's carbon, oxygen and nitrogen. However, by density of matter they will stand in the order, carbon, nitrogen and oxygen. That is 1, 3 and 2. Because nitrogen, by retaining the number 3, that is to say, by being the conductor of the neutralizing force, stands by its density of matter, between carbon and oxygen. And oxygen appears as the densest of the 3. Carbon, oxygen and nitrogen together will give matter of the fourth order, or hydrogen, H, whose density we will designate by the number 6, as the sum of 1, 2 and 3, that is, H6. The first triad, C, O and N, retain their numbers 1, 2 and 3. Carbon is always 1, oxygen is always 2 and nitrogen is always 3. However, being more active than oxygen, nitrogen enters as the active principle in the next triad, and enters with a density of 2. In other words, nitrogen has a density of 2, and oxygen a density of 3. So that the note La, of the first triad, is the conductor of the active force in the next triad, which it enters with a density of 2. If carbon enters with the density of 2, then oxygen and nitrogen must correspond to it in densities, repeating the ratio of densities of the first triad. In the first triad, the ratio of the densities was 1, 2, 3. In the second triad it should be 2, 4, 6. That is, carbon of the second triad will possess the density of 2, nitrogen a density of 4 and oxygen a density of 6. Taken together they will give hydrogen 12, or H12. The second triad. According to the same plan and order, the following triad will be constructed: Fa, Shock, Me. Carbon that was nitrogen in the second triad enters with a density of 4. The nitrogen and oxygen corresponding to it must have a density of 8 and 12. Together they will give hydrogen 24, or H24. The next triad, Me, Re, Do, by the same plan and order, will give hydrogen 48, H48. The triad Do, Ti, La, will give hydrogen 96, H96. The triad La, So, Fa, will give hydrogen 192, H192. The triad Fa, Shock, Me, will give hydrogen 384, H384. The triad Me, Re, Do, will give hydrogen 768, H768. The triad Do, Ti, La, will give hydrogen 1536, H1536. The triad La, So, Fa, will give hydrogen 3072, H3072. The triad Fa, Shock, Me, will give hydrogen 6144, H6144. The triad Me, Re, Do, will give hydrogen 12288, H12288. 12 hydrogens are thus obtained, with densities ranging from 6 to 12,288. These 12 hydrogens represent 12 categories of matter contained in the universe. From the absolute to the moon. And if it were possible to establish exactly which of these matters constitute man's organism and act in it, this alone would determine what place humanity occupies in the world.